Vanessa swept into the restaurant like a queen surveying her kingdom. The designer dress hugged her body perfectly, every inch of her exuding the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished wooden floor, each step a declaration of her presence. Her eyes flickered around the space, taking in the dim lighting, the soft music, and the plush decor. "Finally, a place that matches my style," she murmured, the disdain in her voice just loud enough to carry. Vanessa wasn't just any wealthy woman. She was a famous actress, a star whose face graced countless screens and magazines. Her fame gave her a sense of superiority that she wore as easily as her designer clothes. She expected to be treated like royalty wherever she went, and tonight was no exception. As she made her way to the table, she caught sight of Jordan behind the counter. His short, well-kept hair and warm smile were a sharp contrast to the elegant surroundings, or so Vanessa thought. The sight of him, in his simple shirt and apron, caused her to pause, her expression hardening. Jordan was the one assigned to serve her table tonight. But to Vanessa, it wasn't just about him being a waiter. It was about him being a black man in a position she deemed beneath her. Her lips curled in a sneer as she looked him up and down. "I hope he's not the one serving me," she thought, her mind already buzzing with irritation and revulsion. How could someone like him, someone so clearly beneath her in every way, be allowed to serve someone of her stature? Jordan approached the table with a calm, professional demeanor, holding the menu out to her. But before he could even say a word, Vanessa recoiled as if he were holding out something filthy. She didn't just hesitate. She refused outright, her face twisted in contempt. "Do you really expect me to touch that?" she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "You honestly think someone like you should be handling anything that comes near me?" The words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous, drawing the attention of nearby patrons who exchanged shocked glances. To Vanessa, Jordan wasn't just a waiter, he was an affront to her very existence, a reminder that not everyone in the world saw her as the untouchable star she believed herself to be. "Ma'am, this is the menu," Jordan said evenly, refusing to let her words shake him. But inside he felt the sting of her rejection, the cold burn of her prejudice. Vanessa didn't even glance at the menu. "I don't care what it is. I won't have you touching anything that's meant for me. Find someone else, someone more appropriate to serve me." The other patrons couldn't help but listen, their discomfort growing as they witnessed the unfolding scene. Jordan remained calm, his voice steady. "Of course, ma'am. I'll have someone else attend to your table." He turned and walked back to the counter, each step heavy with the weight of the insult. He called over Luke and handed him the menu. "Take care of table 5, Jordan said quietly. Luke nodded. He had witnessed the exchange and understood what was at play. Taking the menu, he approached the table, trying to hide his unease. "Good evening, ma'am. I'll be serving you tonight," he said, his voice steady. Vanessa barely acknowledged him, already dismissing him as irrelevant. "I want the best wine in the house and a dish that's not on the menu. Something truly impressive," she demanded, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Luke hesitated, unsure how to respond. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can only serve dishes from the menu. However, I can recommend—" "How dare you!" Vanessa's voice cut through the air like a knife, causing several patrons to glance over, their discomfort evident. "You must understand that I'm paying for a service. I don't want your recommendations. I want something exclusive." Luke swallowed hard, his hands shaking slightly as he held the menu. "Ma'am, our house wine is excellent, and I can assure you—" "Don't bother," Vanessa snapped, her face contorting with disgust. Without warning, she grabbed the menu from his hands and flung it at him. It hit Luke square in the chest before falling to the floor, a dull thud that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet room. "You're just a waiter," she hissed. "Don't forget your place." The room held its breath as Jordan, who had been watching from the counter, felt a surge of anger mixed with a deep, unyielding calm. He had dealt with difficult customers before, but Vanessa was different. Her actions weren't just rude. They were an outright attack on his dignity and the dignity of everyone who worked there. With a slow, measured pace, Jordan approached the table again, his expression neutral. "How can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Vanessa turned her icy gaze on him, clearly unimpressed. "Are you the manager?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. "Because I'd rather speak to someone who actually has some authority here. This is ridiculous." Jordan met her gaze evenly, not flinching. "Actually, I'm the owner of this restaurant, and while I appreciate your business, I cannot fulfill requests that don't respect our menu or our staff." Vanessa stared at him incredulous. "You?" She nearly spat the word out. "The owner? Dressed like that? Are you seriously telling me that a black man who looks like a waiter is in charge here?" Her voice was loud enough for everyone around to hear, her words filled with disdain and incredulity. The implication was clear. Vanessa couldn't fathom that someone like Jordan could be in a position of power. To her, it was an insult that this restaurant, one she had expected to cater to her every whim, wasn't bending over backward to accommodate her. "This is unacceptable," Vanessa continued, her anger boiling over. "First, I'm not getting the service I'm paying for, and now I have to deal with someone who clearly doesn't know how to handle customers of my stature. I expect better than this." Jordan remained unfazed, his calm exterior hiding the turmoil beneath. "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am, but I can't fulfill an unreasonable request." Vanessa's eyes flashed with fury. "Do you even know who I am?" she demanded, her voice rising. "With one word, I could ruin this place. Just one word from me, and this restaurant will be nothing more than a memory." Jordan looked at her steadily, his voice firm but respectful. "I know exactly who you are, ma'am. You're a famous actress, and I respect your work. But in this restaurant, every customer is treated with the same respect and dignity. Fame doesn't entitle anyone to more than that." Vanessa's mouth opened in shock, her face flushing with a mix of anger and embarrassment. To be compared to just any customer was a blow to her ego, a wound to the pride she had built up over years of stardom. She felt utterly insulted. "Well, if that's how you're going to treat a star, then I think this meal should be on the house," she snapped, her voice tinged with entitlement. "Or at the very least, you could offer a significant discount, considering the disgraceful service I've received." Jordan's patience was wearing thin, but he maintained his composure. "I'm afraid that's not possible, ma'am. We don't offer free meals or discounts based on dissatisfaction with our policies or staff." Vanessa's eyes blazed with fury. "So you're telling me I'm supposed to pay full price after being treated like this? I'll make sure everyone knows how poorly I was treated here. This will ruin your reputation." Jordan remained calm and firm in his response. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but I cannot fulfill an unreasonable request. Our policies are in place to ensure fairness and respect for all our customers and staff." Vanessa's face twisted in disbelief and anger. "You think you can treat me like this and get away with it? You'll regret this. I'll leave a negative review that will ruin you. Nothing less than special treatment is acceptable for someone like me." Jordan took a deep breath, his calm exterior hiding the turmoil beneath. "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am, but I can't fulfill an unreasonable request, and I won't tolerate any form of disrespect toward my staff or this establishment." "You'll regret this," Vanessa spat, venom dripping from every word as she grabbed her purse and stood to leave. The other patrons watched her go, a few whispering among themselves, others simply relieved that the storm had passed. Jordan watched her go, his heart beating a little faster, but his resolve firmly rooted. He wouldn't let people like Vanessa trample over the dignity of his restaurant or his staff. This was his place, and here, respect was not a privilege, it was a requirement. As the door swung shut behind her, the room exhaled collectively. The tension dissipated, and the murmur of conversation slowly returned. Jordan turned back to the counter, his mind already moving on to the next task. Vanessa might have been the star in her world, but here Jordan was the one who set the stage. And in his domain, no amount of fame or wealth could buy what she had so carelessly discarded: respect. Vanessa, her pride bruised and her ego in tatters, seethed with anger as she stormed out of Jordan's restaurant. The thought that he, a black man, had stood up to her, refusing to bow to her demands, was intolerable. In her world, her fame was a weapon, a tool to be wielded against anyone who dared to cross her. As she settled into the back seat of her luxury car, her mind raced with thoughts of revenge. With a sharp inhale, she unlocked her smartphone, the cold blue light reflecting off her perfectly manicured nails. Her fingers moved with purpose, each tap on the screen a calculated strike. She began crafting a post that would tarnish not just Jordan's restaurant, but his very reputation. "I would never go to a place where the owner doesn't know how to treat real customers. This is a clear example of poor management," she typed, the words oozing with venom. She attached a photo of the restaurant, its cozy, inviting ambiance, now a backdrop to her simmering fury. With a final tap, she posted the message to her millions of followers. Within seconds, notifications began flooding her screen. Likes, comments, shares, her influence spreading like wildfire. Her followers, many of whom were also influential figures in the social sphere, didn't hesitate to express their indignation. "I'm shocked. I'll never go to that place again," commented a friend with a large following of her own. "This is disgraceful. We should all boycott this place," another chimed in, their words echoing Vanessa's wrath. Vanessa's lips curled into a satisfied smile as she watched the support pour in. Each new comment, each share, felt like a small victory. She was a queen on a throne of broken glass, and each shard represented a piece of the power she wielded through her social media presence. Jordan, she thought with a sneer, would soon regret the day he dared to challenge her. But the campaign didn't stop there. Vanessa's thirst for revenge pushed her to escalate her attack. She began urging her followers not just to avoid the restaurant, but to actively speak out against it. "This place doesn't deserve your business," she posted in another update. "Let's make sure everyone knows how terrible it is. Spread the word, boycott this restaurant." Her followers, many of them just as eager to engage in the drama, quickly took up the call. The hashtag #JoshBoycottJordanRestaurant began trending, and soon it wasn't just Vanessa's immediate circle that was involved. The campaign spiraled out of control, drawing in people who had never even heard of Jordan's restaurant before. The negativity spread like a virus, infecting every corner of social media. The effect was swift and devastating. Regular customers began canceling reservations, citing the controversy they had seen online. The once bustling restaurants now had empty tables during peak hours, and Jordan could feel the unease growing among his staff. The fear that the restaurant might not survive this onslaught of bad press was palpable. Back at the restaurant, the atmosphere was tense. The usual clatter of dishes and murmur of conversation seemed muffled, as if the very air had thickened with unease. Jordan, usually so composed, could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The notifications on his phone were a constant reminder of the storm brewing online. "Jordan, did you see what she's posting?" one of the waitresses asked, her eyes wide with concern. She held up her phone, showing him the growing stream of negativity surrounding the restaurant. "She's saying you're a terrible owner and that the service here is inferior." Jordan glanced at the screen, the corners of his mouth tightening. He could feel the indignation bubbling inside him, but he knew he had to remain calm. "Let them talk," he said quietly, but with a firmness that commanded attention. "We're building something bigger than just a restaurant here. We're building respect." The waitress nodded, though her worry was still evident. She, like the rest of the staff, knew how powerful Vanessa's influence could be. But Jordan's words carried a weight that reassured them, at least for the moment. As the restaurant continued to operate, with customers coming in and out, Jordan kept a watchful eye on the unfolding situation. But the reality was undeniable. The smear campaign was having its intended effect. Each cancelled reservation felt like a blow, and Jordan knew that if the trend continued, he might be forced to make difficult decisions. The thought of closing the restaurant, the place he had poured his heart and soul into, was a looming nightmare. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in the comfort of her home, basking in the glow of her smartphone screen. The comments, the likes, the shares, it was all so intoxicating. She felt powerful, vindicated. In her mind, she was finally getting the justice she deserved. "I think I'll do a series of posts about how the service here is unacceptable," she mused aloud, her voice dripping with satisfaction. The thought of extending her campaign, of further damaging Jordan's livelihood, brought a smile to her face. But as Vanessa reveled in her newfound power, she remained oblivious to the fact that the very thing she was using to destroy Jordan could turn on her just as quickly. The world of social media was fickle, and in her blind quest for revenge, she was playing a dangerous game, one where the stakes were far higher than she realized. As Vanessa basked in the glow of her perceived victory, her sense of righteousness only grew stronger. To her, this was more than just a petty act of revenge, it was justice. But as the days passed, the comments and likes on her posts began to shift in tone. The tide of public opinion, once firmly in her favor, started to turn. It began with a few scattered comments, voices that dared to question Vanessa's narrative. Is this really about bad service, or is it about something else? One user asked, their words seemingly innocent but loaded with implication. Another chimed in, this feels more like a personal vendetta than an actual issue with the restaurant. Vanessa brushed off these comments at first, convinced they were just outliers in a sea of support. But soon, the whispers grew louder, and before long the internet's notorious sleuths had begun digging into Vanessa's past. What they uncovered was far more damaging than any negative review she could have left for Jordan. Someone found an old video of Vanessa berating a barista at a coffee shop, her voice sharp and condescending as she demanded her drink be remade. Twice. Another video surfaced of her at a high-end boutique where she was caught on camera belittling a sales associate for not finding a dress in her size quickly enough. These videos, once buried in the archives of the internet, were now being shared with hashtags like #Vanessa and #Vanessa, the abuser. It wasn't long before #Vanessa, the abuser began trending. The once supportive followers were now turning on her, calling out her behavior as entitled and abusive. The narrative had shifted, Vanessa was no longer the victim she had painted herself to be, but the aggressor. The public, always eager for a new target, had found one in her. As the tide of public opinion began to turn against her, Vanessa clung to the belief that she was the victim in all this. The backlash was building, but she refused to see it as anything more than the jealous reactions of people who couldn't stand to see a powerful woman like her defend herself. She was Vanessa, after all, a star, an influencer, someone who had earned her place at the top. How dare anyone try to take that from her? Her manager, Ethan, watched the chaos unfold with growing concern. He had been with Vanessa for years, guiding her career through the ups and downs of the entertainment industry. But this time, he feared she had gone too far. The internet was ruthless, and the tide was turning faster than even he had anticipated. "Vanessa," Ethan said carefully, his tone calm but urgent as they sat in her lavish living room. "We need to talk about what's happening. The backlash is getting worse and brands are starting to pull out. If we don't act quickly, this could destroy everything we've built." Vanessa rolled her eyes, waving a hand dismissively. "It's just a few trolls online, Ethan. They'll get bored and move on. I'm the victim here. Jordan disrespected me, and I won't let him get away with it." Ethan shook his head, trying to remain patient. "It's not just a few trolls, Vanessa. The videos, the comments, they're going viral. People are starting to see you as a bully, not a victim. We need to get ahead of this before it's too late." Vanessa's face hardened, her eyes narrowing as she looked at him. "Are you seriously taking their side? I thought you were supposed to be on my team, Ethan. You don't understand what it's like to be in my position." "I am on your team," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "That's why I'm telling you this. If we don't do something now, you could lose everything. The brands, the fans, the opportunities, they're all at risk." "Everything's at risk?" Vanessa's voice was laced with sarcasm. "Because I stood up for myself. Give me a break, Ethan. This is just a blip on the radar. I've dealt with worse." Ethan sighed, feeling the frustration bubbling up inside him. He knew how stubborn Vanessa could be, but this was different. The stakes were higher than ever before, and she was refusing to see the reality of the situation. "Vanessa, I'm serious. You need to apologize, publicly. Show people that you're willing to take responsibility, that you're not above admitting when you've made a mistake." Vanessa's expression darkened, her temper flaring. "A mistake? The only mistake here is that Jordan didn't know his place. He should have treated me with the respect I deserve. And now you're telling me to apologize to him? To grovel at his feet like some nobody?" "Yes," Ethan said bluntly. "If you want to save your career, that's exactly what you need to do." The words hit Vanessa like a slap in the face. For a moment, she just stared at him, her eyes blazing with anger. Then, without warning, she stood up, knocking over a glass on the coffee table. It shattered on the floor, but Vanessa didn't care. Her fury was like a storm, raging and uncontrollable. "You're fired!" she spat, her voice shaking with emotion. "Get out! Now!" Ethan's face remained impassive, but there was a flicker of sadness in his eyes. He had seen this coming, but it still hurt to hear the words. "Vanessa, you're making a mistake." "The only mistake I made was trusting you," she shot back, her voice cold. "Now get out of my house." Ethan didn't argue. He knew there was no point. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind him. Vanessa stood there, her chest heaving, her heart pounding in her ears. But as the silence settled around her, the reality of what she had just done began to sink in. She had fired the one person who had always been on her side, the one person who had seen her at her best and her worst, and had still stuck by her. But In her anger, in her desperation to maintain control, she had pushed him away. And now she was truly alone. While Vanessa was grappling with her crumbling world, Jordan found himself on the opposite trajectory. The smear campaign had initially caused some damage, with a few cancelled reservations and tense moments. But as the truth came to light, the tide began to turn in his favor. The community, many of whom had been regular patrons, rallied around him. They had seen firsthand the integrity and respect with which Jordan ran his restaurant, and they weren't about to let a celebrity's vendetta destroy it. Local news outlets picked up the story, framing Jordan as the resilient underdog standing firm against unjust attacks. A symbol of dignity in the face of discrimination, one headline read. Social media, once a battlefield, began to shift in his favor. Customers who had dined at Jordan's restaurant shared their positive experiences, countering Vanessa's narrative with stories of his kindness and fairness. As the days went on, Jordan's restaurant saw a surge in business. The tables that had once sat empty were now filled with customers eager to show their support. The atmosphere in the restaurant was one of quiet triumph. Jordan had not only weathered the storm, but had come out stronger. His restaurant was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a symbol of resilience and the power of community. "Jordan, look at this," one of the waitresses said, holding up her phone. The screen was filled with messages of support, people pledging to visit the restaurant and spread the word about the truth. "People are really standing up for you." Jordan smiled, a deep sense of gratitude swelling in his chest. "It's not just about me," he replied, his voice steady. "It's about all of us. We stood our ground, and now people are seeing what we're really about." The support continued to grow, and soon the restaurant was busier than ever. Jordan had to hire additional staff to keep up with the demand. What had started as a personal attack had turned into an opportunity for growth, both for the business and for Jordan himself. He had faced down prejudice and hate, and in doing so had earned the respect and admiration of his community. Days later, Vanessa sat in her living room, staring blankly at the television. The news was abuzz with the latest developments in her story. Pundits debated whether her apology, should it come, would be enough to salvage her reputation. The very thought of walking into Jordan's restaurant, of lowering herself to apologize to him, made her skin crawl. The backlash was swift and severe. Brands that had once lined up to work with Vanessa began to distance themselves. The emails from her management team started coming in, each one more urgent than the last. Contracts were being cancelled, sponsorships pulled. The very influence Vanessa had wielded to destroy Jordan was now crumbling beneath her feet. "Vanessa, we need to talk." The voice of her manager, Gregory, was cold and devoid of the usual deference. "I've been fielding calls all morning from brands wanting to cut ties. They're saying you're a PR nightmare." Vanessa felt a jolt of panic, but quickly masked it with indignation. "A PR nightmare? I'm the victim here. Jordan disrespected me, and I have every right to call him out." Gregory's sigh on the other end of the line was heavy with frustration. "Vanessa, listen to me," he pleaded. "You have to do this. You have to go to the restaurant, make a public statement, show some remorse. If you don't, we're done. Your career is done." Gregory's tone was icy. "The brands don't care about your justifications, Vanessa. They care about their image. And right now, being associated with you is toxic. If you don't do something to fix this, you'll lose everything." Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. Lose everything? The thought was unthinkable. She was Vanessa, the star, the influencer, the woman who could make or break a business with a single post. Vanessa clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. "I'm the victim here," she insisted, her voice cracking with frustration. "Why can't anyone see that?" "Because you're not acting like a victim," Gregory shot back. "You're acting like a spoiled brat who can't take responsibility. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. Do you want to be remembered as the star who destroyed herself out of pride?" Gregory didn't hesitate. "You need to make this right. Go to Jordan's restaurant. Apologize publicly. Show people that you're capable of humility, or at least pretend to be." Vanessa's stomach twisted at the thought. Apologize? To Jordan? The very idea was repulsive. He was the one who had wronged her, and now she was expected to grovel at his feet. "I can't do that," she whispered, more to herself than to Gregory. "You will do it." Gregory's voice was unyielding. "If you want to survive in this industry, you'll swallow your pride and do whatever it takes. Otherwise, you can kiss your career goodbye." The line went dead, leaving Vanessa in stunned silence. For the first time, the reality of her situation hit her. The power she had always taken for granted was no longer hers to wield. The world of social media, so fickle and unpredictable, had turned on her with a vengeance, and now she was the one facing the consequences. The drive to Jordan's restaurant was silent, the tension in the car thick enough to cut with a knife. Vanessa stared out the window, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. The humiliation of what she was about to do gnawed at her. When she arrived, the restaurant was already buzzing with anticipation. News of her impending apology had leaked and the media was out in full force, cameras flashing as she stepped out of the car. Vanessa squared her shoulders, plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was here to perform, to play the role of the repentant star, even if every fiber of her being rebelled against it. She took a deep breath, adjusted her designer sunglasses, and pushed open the door. The familiar chime of the bell above the door sounded almost mocking to her ears. Inside, the restaurant was abuzz with activity, but the usual warmth had been replaced by a tense, expectant atmosphere. Everyone knew why she was there. Inside, Jordan was waiting. The sight of him standing there, calm and composed, made Vanessa's blood boil. "Jordan," she began, her voice cool and detached. "I'm here to apologize for the misunderstanding that occurred." Jordan nodded slightly, but his eyes were sharp, watching her carefully. "Go on," he said, his tone giving nothing away. Vanessa's eyes flickered around the room, noting the curious stares from the staff and the few customers who were present. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, and it took every ounce of her willpower to keep her composure. "I'm sorry if my actions were misunderstood or if they caused any offense," she continued, choosing her words carefully. "However, I think it's important that the truth is clarified. I would appreciate it if you could make a public statement on social media explaining that this whole situation was a misunderstanding." The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Jordan's response. He remained silent for a moment, his gaze steady on Vanessa. Then, with a calm voice, he replied, "I appreciate your apology, Vanessa, but I cannot make any statement that would alter the truth of what happened. My staff and I deserve to be treated with respect, and I won't compromise on that." Vanessa's mask of composure cracked slightly, her frustration rising to the surface. "You don't understand," she hissed, her voice low but trembling with anger. "This is about my career, my reputation. If you don't clarify things, I could lose everything." Jordan's expression didn't change. "I understand perfectly, Vanessa, but I won't lie to protect your reputation. The truth is important, and it won't be twisted to suit anyone's narrative." The anger that had been simmering inside Vanessa suddenly exploded. She glared at Jordan, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "You're doing this on purpose," she accused, her voice rising. "You want to see me fail, don't you? You're trying to ruin me." Jordan didn't flinch. "No, Vanessa. You're the one who put yourself in this position. I'm just standing by what's right." Vanessa's fury boiled over. She raised her voice, now practically shouting, "You think you're so righteous, don't you? Well, I won't let you get away with this. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I'll destroy your business, your life, everything." By now, the entire restaurant was watching the scene unfold. Staff and customers alike exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. But Jordan remained calm, his resolve unshaken. "If that's how you feel, then you should leave, Vanessa," Jordan said firmly, his voice cutting through her tirade. "I won't allow anyone to threaten me or my staff. If you can't behave respectfully, you're not welcome here." Vanessa's face was flushed with anger, but behind her rage was a flicker of panic. She had come here to save her career, to regain control of the narrative, but it was all slipping through her fingers. She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could speak, something caught her eye. Across the restaurant, a customer had raised their phone, recording the entire confrontation. Vanessa's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Others were following suit, their phones pointed at her, capturing every moment of her meltdown. Panic gripped her chest, tightening like a vice. The walls of the restaurant seemed to close in around her, the eyes of everyone in the room boring into her. She could feel her carefully constructed image crumbling, and the thought of what those videos would do to her already fragile reputation was too much to bear. Without another word, Vanessa turned on her heel and bolted for the door. The sound of the bell jingling above her head was drowned out by the pounding of her heart as she fled the restaurant, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her hands were shaking as she fumbled for her phone, desperate to call someone, anyone who could help her salvage what was left of her career. But before she could dial, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Vanessa." She turned around to see Ethan standing there, his expression a mixture of disappointment and anger. The sight of him sent a wave of emotions crashing over her: guilt, resentment, fear. Ethan had been her manager for years, guiding her through the highs and lows of her career. They had been through so much together, and yet she had cast him aside in a fit of rage. "What do you want?" Vanessa snapped, her voice harsher than she intended. "I want to talk," Ethan said calmly. "We need to fix this." "Fix this?" Vanessa laughed bitterly. "You think you can fix this? It's too late for that." "It's not too late," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "But you need to stop acting like a victim and start taking responsibility for what you've done." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "I don't need a lecture from you, Ethan. You're just as low as the rest of them." Ethan's expression hardened, the hurt clear in his eyes. "I've stood by you for years, Vanessa. I've fought for you when no one else would. But now you're turning on me? After everything I've done for you? You think I owe you something?" Vanessa's voice was venomous. "You're just a manager, a replaceable cog in the machine. Don't think you're anything more than that." Ethan felt the sting of her words, but something inside him snapped. He had always known Vanessa could be difficult, but this was different. This was beyond arrogance. This was cruelty. And in that moment, he realized he couldn't stand by her any longer. "Maybe you're right," Ethan said quietly, his voice trembling with emotion. "Maybe I am replaceable. But I'm done trying to protect someone who treats people the way you do. You've hurt so many people, Vanessa, people who didn't deserve it, and now you're going to face the consequences." Vanessa's bravado faltered, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm done covering for you," Ethan replied, his voice steely. "I'm going to tell the truth about what you've done, about how you've treated people. The world deserves to know who you really are." Ethan took a deep breath, then continued, "I've worked with Vanessa for years. I've seen her at her best, but I've also seen her at her worst. And lately, it's been more of the latter. What you saw today and what's been happening online isn't just an isolated incident. It's a pattern of behavior, one that's been going on for far too long." He paused, letting his words sink in before going on. "Vanessa has been abusing her power for years. She's bullied and belittled her staff, treated them like they're disposable. She's used her influence to crush anyone who dares to stand up to her. And all the while, she's convinced herself that she's the victim, that she's justified in everything she does because she's Vanessa, the star, the influencer, the one who's always in control." Jordan listened, his expression remaining calm, but his heart heavy with the weight of Ethan's words. He had known that Vanessa was difficult, that she was used to getting her way, but hearing the full extent of her behavior was sobering. Ethan continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "But the truth is, Vanessa has lost control. She's so wrapped up in her own power that she can't see how she's destroying herself. And now it's all coming to light. The world is seeing her for who she really is, not a victim, but a bully. And I'm done protecting her. I'm done standing by and watching her hurt people." The room was silent, the gravity of Ethan's words hanging in the air. For a moment, no one spoke, the reality of what had just been revealed sinking in. The staff exchanged glances, some nodding in quiet agreement, while others looked shocked, as if they had suspected but never truly known the extent of Vanessa's cruelty. But before anyone could respond, the door swung open again, and Vanessa burst back into the restaurant. Her face was flushed with anger, her eyes wild with a mix of fury and desperation. She had heard Ethan's words, and the realization that she was losing control sent her into a blind rage. "How dare you?" Vanessa shouted, her voice trembling with emotion as she marched up to Ethan. "How dare you say those things about me? You don't know anything. You've always been jealous, always wanted to bring me down." Ethan met her gaze evenly, unflinching in the face of her outburst. "This isn't about jealousy, Vanessa. This is about the truth. You've hurt too many people, and it's time you faced the consequences." Vanessa's face twisted in fury, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You're lying!" she spat, her voice rising with each word. "You're just bitter because I fired you. You're a nobody, Ethan, and you always have been." But Ethan didn't back down. He had come too far to be intimidated now. "You can try to blame me, Vanessa, but we both know the truth. This is all you're doing. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them." Vanessa's anger turned to panic as she realized that the room was filled with people who were witnessing her downfall. She turned to Jordan, hoping to find some way to regain control. "You have to stop this," she demanded, her voice shaking. "You have to make him stop lying." But Jordan remained calm, his expression resolute. "I'm not going to lie for you, Vanessa. The truth needs to be heard, and it's time you faced it." Vanessa's eyes darted around the room, seeing the phones pointed at her, capturing every word, every moment of her unraveling. The fear in her chest tightened, and she felt the walls closing in on her. She had always been the one in control, the one who dictated how things would go. But now, she was losing that control, and it terrified her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head as if denying reality would change it. "No, this isn't happening." But it was happening. And as she looked around, seeing the faces of those she had wronged, she realized that there was no escape. The truth was out, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. In a final act of desperation, Vanessa turned on her heel and fled the restaurant once more, pushing past the doors and out into the street. The cameras followed her, capturing her flight, but this time there was no triumph in her steps, only the frantic pace of someone running from the consequences of their own actions. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was heavy, with a mixture of relief and sadness. Jordan watched the door swing shut behind her, knowing that this was the end of Vanessa's reign of terror. But it was also the end of something else, the end of any hope she had of redeeming herself in the eyes of those she had wronged. Ethan stood in the center of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done what he needed to do, but it hadn't been easy. Despite everything, a part of him still cared about Vanessa, still remembered the person she had once been. But that person was gone, replaced by someone he barely recognized. Jordan stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "It's time people knew the truth." Ethan nodded, though the weight of what he had done still hung heavily on him. "I just hope it makes a difference," he replied, his voice tinged with sadness. "It will," Jordan assured him. "It already has." The staff began to gather around them, offering quiet words of support and gratitude. They had all suffered under Vanessa's cruelty, and now they finally felt free from her tyranny. The door to Vanessa's penthouse clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the hollow chambers of her mind. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of flashing cameras and shouted questions she had faced just moments earlier. Her world, once so vibrant and alive, now seemed to be collapsing in on itself. The luxurious furnishings that filled her home, the symbols of her success, felt cold and distant, like relics from a past life that no longer belonged to her. Vanessa sank into the velvet cushions of her sofa, the weight of her defeat pressing down on her chest. She stared blankly at the skyline beyond her windows, the city's lights twinkling like stars, indifferent to her suffering. It was a view she had once found empowering, a reminder of her place at the top of the world. Now it felt like a mockery, a reminder of how far she had fallen. Her phone, once a source of constant validation, lay discarded on the coffee table, its screen dark and silent. Vanessa was no longer the adored actress, the influencer with millions of followers hanging on her every word. She was the subject of ridicule, her name synonymous with entitlement and cruelty. The endorsements had dried up, the invitations to exclusive events ceased. Even her closest friends had begun to distance themselves, wary of being tainted by association. She was alone, utterly and completely alone. As the reality of her situation settled in, Vanessa felt a deep, gnawing fear take hold of her. Jordan, on the other hand, was thriving. The restaurant that had once been under threat was now busier than ever. Word had spread about how he had stood his ground, refusing to bow to Vanessa's demands, and the community had rallied around him. The tables were always full, the atmosphere buzzing with the energy of patrons who respected and admired the values Jordan represented. What had started as a simple restaurant had become a symbol of resilience, a place where people could come together not just for a meal, but for a sense of unity and respect. Jordan had never set out to become a hero, but in standing up for himself and his staff, he had become one in the eyes of his community. Back in her penthouse, Vanessa's thoughts spiraled into darkness. She had lost everything, and there was no one to blame but herself. The arrogance that had once propelled her to stardom had now left her isolated and despised. She had thought she was invincible, but in reality, she was fragile. Her success built on a foundation of shallow praise and fleeting admiration. In her solitude, Vanessa began to confront the harsh truth she had long avoided. Her downfall was of her own making. She had allowed her ego to guide her actions, driven by a need to prove her superiority over others. She had forgotten the importance of humility, of treating others with respect, regardless of their status. And now, she was paying the price. As the days turned into weeks, Vanessa's isolation deepened. The phone calls stopped coming, the invitations ceased entirely. She was a ghost, haunting the edges of a world that no longer had a place for her. She tried to tell herself that she was the victim, that the world had turned on her unfairly. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had destroyed herself, and there was no one left to save her. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around till the end. Wow, what a journey, right? Vanessa's downfall is a stark reminder that no matter how high we climb, our actions and the way we treat others always catch up with us. Her story shows how pride and entitlement can blind us, leading to our own destruction. On the flip side, Jordan's resilience and commitment to respect and dignity prove that integrity wins out in the end. His restaurant became a beacon of community and kindness, standing tall even when things got tough. This story really hits home with some powerful lessons about humility, respect, and the true meaning of success. It's a reminder that the way we treat others shapes our world just as much as our own ambitions. What did you guys think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let's chat about it.